You might be familiar with the idiom seeing is believing, but in the age of artificial intelligence, that might not be true. The company behind ChatGPT has unveiled a new AI system that generates the most realistic looking videos. The rapid advancement of AI may add a grain of truth to another idiom. Don't believe your lying eyes. Ramesh Srinivasan is the director of the UC Center for Global Digital Cultures at UCLA. Professor, thanks for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Listen, AI has had quite a year, from ChatGPT to now these extraordinary images. Tell us how users can create these.
Well, these platforms are pretty simple. So OpenAI has developed a platform called Sora, which you're probably familiar with, and many might be familiar with. All you have to do is feed it, some words like walking down the street in Tokyo in the 1940s, or woolly mammoths, rumbling through the snow. And what it does is it pieces together different pieces of audio-visual content, in this case, visual content, but also the audio associated with it. It can essentially create that scene for you.
Well, tell us in layman's terms, if you can, how the technology is really working, what it's grabbing from the internet, and how's it making the choices?
So this is really important. The way in which all of these technologies work, including ChatGPT, which is also, of course, created by OpenAI, along with Sora, is that it actually takes data that all is gathered from all of us. So basically, any data that is out there on the internet, more or less, they can pretty easily have access to. And what they're able to do is tie video, images, text, audio to words that we might provide it. And so that can also occur even with other images. So it's all based on what we call correlation. So, when you use Google Translate, for example, and you write a bunch of things in English and you say, translate this to Japanese or translate this to Spanish, it doesn't actually understand the language. It understands that those words are related to these words in the other language. So it works very similarly when it comes to both ChatGPT and Sora. But the thing that's amazing about it, as you know, is it's so convincing. And the reason why is because there's so much data out there on the internet.
But the applications of this technology seem to be endless. Everything from, advertising to entertainment to films.
Yes, absolutely, because you can imagine that almost anything can be represented simply by, calling it up using these interfaces, right? So, I could say, let's get a virtual version of Professor Srinivasan, and it could just be summoned up. So essentially what that means on an economic level is that all of our data, which we're not compensated for, by the way, is being used and pieced together to create content that no longer will studios, for example, have to pay for. So that's why there are huge economic and even labor associated issues that are at play here.
Yeah, the ethical considerations are huge. I mean, look, jobs could be lost, but so could elections. Walk us through a couple of the biggest concerns.
Well, absolutely. One of the biggest issues is what we call disinformation. So mass-scale disinformation. We've already seen examples on social media, even before this sort of AI boom, of information that is false spreading across our social media platforms. Americans get their news from social media more than any other traditional news channel or even newspaper. So as a result, what we tend to see on social media, as you know well, tends to be content that's predicted to grab our attention, which can often be kind of extreme or crazy content. So we've already seen that issue occur. But now you can imagine that if an AI system is allowed to create anything and everything and create content that's predicted to grab our attention, which can be often very inflammatory or disastrous content, like a car burning on fire or something that might be hateful in its speech, you can see how that could flood our so-called airwaves. Our airwaves, in this case, are our social media platforms and our sites.
Listen, I've got to turn to Washington, D.C., because with social media, we've seen them 10 paces behind, right? What sort of guardrails do our lawmakers need to be thinking about to protect us?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think we need to recognize that it's always been true in this country and in other countries that technological breakthroughs occur very rapidly and in a way that sort of jars societies. It takes a while for society to catch up, especially policymakers. And you are right that when it came to social media, and we're continuing to see the repercussions of it, a lot of our representatives don't seem to be able to, in Congress, and senators don't seem to be able to come to a consensus to deal with a problematic status quo, even though almost all of them are unhappy with the status quo, mind you. So that's kind of what needs to happen. We always need to think about policy issues, protecting the public, protecting economic security, protecting our democracy, protecting journalists. We need to think about those concurrently with technological innovation. The problem is we're talking about private companies that, generally speaking, are not really accountable to anybody. They're accountable to the public, but mostly they're accountable to their investors and their executives and their customers. So as a result, they're going to do what they're going to do, right? And you can't expect them to take steps to protect these and deal with these issues. In some cases, they are sort of willfully ignorant about these issues. And so that's why it's not just our elected representatives, but their staffers. They really need to get together and think, let's look 5 months, 1 year, 2 years, even 5 years. What are all the issues that are coming up and will come up in relation to this? And let's make some policy decisions to ensure that these breakthroughs in AI, which are amazing, are not ones that come at the cost of everybody else, for just to help a few companies.
Professor Ramesh Srinivasan, thank you so much.
Oh, I enjoyed being with you. Thank you for having me.
Coming up, a self-described rule breaker takes up glass blowing. See his beautiful creations when LA Times Today returns.